Somehow the trombone is sort of like my voice. It represents a human voice to me. I think it's my self-expression.
Mr. Tom Bones Malone, thank you so much for joining me here in Cleveland today.
My pleasure.
We're here at the lovely Bop Stop here in downtown Cleveland. Honored to have you here. So,
It's my pleasure to be here.
you play a ton of instruments.
I play 14 instruments professionally.
Yeah, right on. And so, I mean, that's a lot. The entire brass family.
The entire brass family
Yeah.
and the saxophone family and the flute family.
You're known as a trombonist first and foremost. Like, what's the impetus behind that? Why do you gravitate towards the trombone, and like why do you your nickname is Bones?
Well, when I was in the 6th grade, the band, the marching band for the school, the high school, used to rehearse by the football field. It was right out the window of the 6th grade class. And so I heard the band playing, and there was something interesting about the band. One day on the public address system, they said, anybody that wants to be in the band, come to the band hall Thursday night at 7 o'clock and bring your parents. So I showed up there with my brother and my parents, and the guy from the music store had all the stuff laid out, and I picked up a trombone, and I could almost play it. My dad says, how much is it? And he says, we can't afford it. So we're walking out of the band hall, and the band director grabs me and says, you can play the school's tuba. You don't have to buy anything. So I started playing the tuba, and then my grandmother gave me $100 out of her Social Security to buy a trombone, and I mowed lawns for the other $100 and bought a $200 trombone. I was really motivated to play it for some reason. I'm not exactly sure. And then I picked up the cornet and then the saxophone, and but somehow the trombone is sort of like my voice. It represents a human voice to me, not unlike yourself on the tenor sax.
Sure, yeah.
It's sort of the same octave.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you would say it most represents, your sound.
I think it's my self-expression.
Okay.
Yes.
As far as the saxophone, that's a totally different animal, and like I can't play any brass at all. So how did you pick up the saxophone out of becoming a brass player? And then,
well, when I was 14, some guys came over to my house, a drummer and a couple of guitar players and a saxophone player, and they said, we're starting a rock and roll band. You want to be in it? I'm like, yeah. And I got out my trombone, and they looked at me like I was crazy. Now, this is 1960. So I said, what's up? And they said, you don't have trombones in rock and roll bands. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I want to be in the band. I want to hang with the guys. I want to meet girls. They said, you got to play saxophone. So my best friend in high school was a guy named Alan Sumrall, and he had an alto and a tenor with him that night. So he started teaching me how to play tenor sax right then and there. And we worked out some songs at that rehearsal.
so you picked it up pretty quick then.
Well, I was motivated. I wanted to be in the band and hang with the guys and meet girls. So I was very motivated, and I bought a tenor sax for $75, and I continued to play it.
Yeah, prices have gone up a bit since then.
Well, this is true. Well, this was not a Mark VI saxophone, the one that I got for $75 anyway. And then when I started in college, I bought a flute. I saw one on the bulletin board for $75, and I bought it. So I continued my playing different musical instruments.
This is a related question, but how do you have the time to keep up all of these instruments?
Well, I have a way of maintaining my chops. These muscles in the corner of your embouchure, they play all the wind instruments, the flutes, saxophones, and all the brass. So if I have a limited amount of time to practice, I will do what's called lip slur exercises on the brass instruments. If I have a limited amount of time to practice, I'll do lip slurs on the trumpet because the compression level is higher. It's sort of like a weightlifter doesn't just walk in and lift 500 pounds. He takes 25-pound hand weights and does repetition, 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 repetition.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the playing lip slurs on the trumpet as opposed to the trombone is like lifting a heavier weight. So I do a lot of repetitions, and then I put the horn down, and I do a lot of repetitions, and to keep these muscles in shape. This gives you endurance and range.
if you've played a ton of trumpet and you've warmed up, really nicely on trumpet, the trombone then is, like lifting a 5-pound weight then at that point.
It's about half the weight, and the tuba isn't even half the weight of the trombone as far as the compression level is concerned. So that's my way of using my time efficiently.
Okay. No, that's very cool. How often do you practice, and how much do you practice?
Well, I don't practice as much as I should. When I was in junior high and high school, I practiced 4 or 5 hours a day. And one of the reasons was that I was living on a farm in Mississippi in the middle of nowhere. And I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't want to milk cows, pick corn, haul hay, or any of that sort of thing. I wanted to, I saw music as my way to get out of the farm. And I envisioned myself moving to New York when I was in high school.
Listening to you play the trombone and some of your classic recordings, you listen to Blues Brothers recordings, your trombone solos are very lyrical. You have a lyrical and melodious approach to playing. What do you think about when you're crafting a solo, either in the studio or live or both? I mean, what crosses your mind? I
don't really try to think. I try to let the other side of my brain work. I have a degree in psychology, and your brain has a dominant side and a subdominant side. And the dominant side of your brain, let's say you're right-handed, the left side of your brain is dominant. You have mathematical concepts and reasoning going on. On the other side of your brain, all the experiences and music that you've heard has been digested, and it comes out, the subconscious is on the other side of your brain. And when I hear a rhythm section playing, I hear a melody coming out of that side of my brain. And I just try to turn it over to that side of my brain. At this point, the instrument plays itself, at this point in my career. When I first started improvising, I'm thinking about, well, what key are we in? What scale should I be playing? What sort of 2-5-1 progression is going on here? I don't do that anymore. I just listen to that other side of my brain, and I just play what comes out. It's just like when the horn plays itself. When you walk, you don't think about walking. The walking works by itself. Your moving center of your body walks, and you're thinking about everything else besides walking. It's on autopilot. When you drive the car, your moving center is driving the car. You're thinking about everything else except driving the car while you're driving. So playing the instrument or one of the 14 instruments in my life today, they're all on autopilot. I just listen for that melody to come out of my head, and then the instrument plays itself.
No, yeah, that makes total sense.
That's why we need to practice. We want the instrument to play itself.
Your analogy with walking, I was just thinking about the fact that if you think about the fact that you're walking, you might actually mess up, or you might cause yourself to, if you overthink the process, something that's automated, you might actually fall because
Well, when you first started walking, you saw other people walking and you imitated their behavior, and when you first took your first steps, it was a little unsure. But after a while, it becomes automatic, and it happens at such a young age that we probably don't remember when we started walking.
Sure.
But we certainly remember when we started driving a car. When I first started, I was scared. But now it's just, the moving center of my body does it, and I don't think about it.
Sure. You were born in Honolulu in 1947.
Correct.
And your dad was a survivor of the Pearl Harbor attack. Tell me about your parents and, how they molded your musical development and how that came about.
Well, my parents are both rednecks from South Mississippi, and my dad got out of flight school in Pensacola, Florida in August 1941.
Okay.
They got married on August 29th. His first tour of duty was Pearl Harbor as a pilot. Now they're living on the base, Pearl City Naval Housing, on the north end of the harbor. And that was the approach of the enemy aircraft on that day, December 7th, 1941. So mother gets up to go to the bathroom, and she says to my dad, she says, those planes that just went over, they're not ours. He says, how can you tell? She says, they have an orange circle under the wing.
Oh, wow.
So 10 seconds later, the bombs hit the harbor, and my father got called in. Now, he was stationed at Ford Island. If you've ever seen a map of Pearl Harbor, Ford Island is the airport, and it's on an island in the middle of the harbor. There was no bridge. So he had to go across the harbor during the bombing in a small boat. He said they were following a destroyer, and the destroyer was bombed and sank right in front of him. the small boat was not a military target. So anyway, they got to the airport, got a couple of planes in the air, and then they strafed the airport, and then they bombed the airport. And he said a lot of his friends died in front of him. Anyway, so I was a Navy brat until I was 11. My dad retired in 1958 and bought a farm in South Mississippi. And it was a totally foreign situation for me. Milking cows, hauling hay, picking corn, racism, you know, it was a whole new concept for me. It never made any sense to me. And as I started playing pop music, I realized that all my favorite artists, you know, jazz, rhythm and blues, blues, were all black artists. So I knew that I had to get out of Mississippi in order to do what I wanted to do. I had an unusual experience too that nobody else from Mississippi ever had. I went with my dad and a friend of his to a bar nightclub. We lived in a dry county in Mississippi, but right over the county line, there was this club. And I wasn't old enough to drink, but I could go with my dad to this club. And there was an all-black band, rhythm and blues band, playing at the club. And it blew my mind how good these guys were. 2 weeks later, I go to the music store in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and the new instrument repairman is the leader of the band.
Oh, wow.
Terry Leggett, and the jewels are swinging. So we started talking about music, and we like all the same music. And I told him that I arranged music, and he said, well, you know, my band could learn these new songs that come out a lot faster if we had a chart. Why don't you write a chart for me? And,
yeah, oh, cool.
So I showed up to rehearsal and hit it off with all these guys, and then did a couple of arrangements like that for him again. And then Terry calls me up and he says, my band's working every night between Christmas and New Year's. One of my horn players has to lead music for a church revival. He can't make any of the gigs. Mm-hmm. You want to play with my band for the week? And I said, yes. And it was, we didn't have any trouble. Everybody was nice to me, and we didn't have any trouble because all the clubs we played at were so far into the ghetto that there was no white people to make any trouble.
That's quite a fortuitous happening, isn't it? Yeah.
But it opened my eyes to a situation, and nobody else ever did that.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's quite an experience. It reminds me of the Charlie Parker story going touring the Deep South with the bebop band that had Red Rodney.
Yes.
Yeah, reminds me of that.
Exactly the same story. Because I realized that I wanted to play with James Brown and Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles. And I knew it wasn't going to happen down in Mississippi.
No, probably not. But that's still a great experience, and getting to play with a totally different. I mean, that had to impact your music at a young age.
Yes.
Yeah. Just the feeling of the music, if nothing else, probably gave you a wholly different viewpoint. Especially versus playing in New York, for instance.
So all I played with at that point professionally was little high school white rhythm and blues bands, and this band just blew them all out of the water, and it was an experience that I'll never forget.
That definitely helped probably shape you from high school age. So.
Absolutely.
You attended North Texas University, and you were in the 1 O'Clock band there, which is
I played lead trombone in the 1 O'Clock band and lead trumpet in the 3 O'Clock band.
Oh wow, yeah.
I auditioned on saxophone, I auditioned on tenor sax, and the saxophone instructor says, "Okay, get out of here."
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey, I played the part perfectly." He says, "I have 60 jazz saxophone majors here. We only have 30 chairs in the band. You're already playing in 2 bands, and you're not even a music major. So get out of here."
So you majored in psychology there.
Yes.
When you went to school there, did you wanted to get involved with music right off the bat, or was that something that happened over the course of time while you were there?
Well, I put myself through college at North Texas by playing gigs and by contracting bands for band leaders from New York. They would call me up and they'd say, "We're going to be the Tommy Dorsey band in Houston, 350 miles away."
Oh wow!
We'd get a 16-piece band together and show up, and we would sight read music for 4 hours. And there were people at North Texas that could do that. So that I represented several of the big bands.
How did you get that gig? How did that come
well,
about?
I got hired to play with the Tommy Dorsey Ghost Band for one-nighter in Biloxi, Mississippi, when I was living in Hattiesburg, going to college. And I showed up for this gig, and it was Warren Covington, the big-time New York trombone player. Warren Covington and the Tommy Dorsey Band. And the contractor that hired me was an older trombone player in Jackson, Mississippi. So when the gig was over, Warren comes up to me and he says, this guy can't play shit.
Yeah.
He says, I like the way you play, kid. He says, next time I come down here, I'll bet you could get me a band, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And I said, yes. Gave him my business card.
Yeah.
And he hired me the next time he came down had a job in Louisiana, and I got him a top-notch band.
Oh, right on.
And, he said, and so when I moved to North Texas, I called him up. Warren, I'm living in Denton, Texas. He says, you'll be my contractor. And he gave my name to other band leaders in New York that did ghost band jobs like that, like the Glenn Miller Band and Ray McKinley. And so I was able to send myself to college by doing that kind of work. And a memorable one was I hired a horn section for a 3-night tour with Martha and the Vandellas, the Supremes, and the Temptations, 1969. The original Temptations, the original Supremes. And that blew my mind. They brought a rhythm section from Detroit down. And then that led to a job with Marvin Gaye. It led to a job with little Stevie Wonder when he was 16.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just opened a lot of doors.
All of these, I mean,
I was still in college.
yeah, and so much of this spawned from your experience at North Texas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And one door simply led from another to another to another.
The reason I went to North Texas is that when I was going to school in Hattiesburg my first 2 years, I was playing with the North Texas Big Band, and we played at the Mobile Jazz Festival, the spring of 1967. And I wrote some charts, played some solos. Lou Marini shows up with the North Texas Band, and he wrote some charts and played some solos. We met, and he says, man, he says, you should really transfer to North Texas next year. So I did. And Lou and I have been playing together ever since.
Yeah, so that's when you met Lou Marini.
Yes.
Oh, very cool.
And he's turned me on to gigs in my career, and I've turned him on to gigs in my career. And
oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys are still close friends?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
55 years later.
Yeah, just a few years. So why didn't you major in music, just out of curiosity? Why?
Well, I started off as a music major, and but I had actually started teaching myself about music when I was about 13. I heard a record on the radio, and I wanted to know how do the notes fit together to make that sound. So I bought this single and listened to it carefully, and I would pick out the notes, and I wrote an arrangement. And I didn't know whether it was right or not, but then I was rummaging around in the back part of the music store one day, and they published the arrangement, and I made about a 96 on my arrangement. So I continued to arrange music. And so I took a course called Music Theory 101, my first year in college. And I answered all the questions for the first 2 weeks. And then the teacher takes me out in the hall and says, you don't have to come to class. You get an A.
Oh, wow.
He wanted the rest of the class to participate. You know, he says, you already know all this stuff.
Oh, that's too cool.
So I was sort of self-taught.
Yeah, okay.
So I changed my major to psychology, and I found that fascinating. And I also found it to come in very handy when dealing with musicians.
Oh, that's certainly true, yeah. So in regards to your psychology, the background, how has that led to, I mean, how has that helped you in life, just out of curiosity?
Well, just making a good impression on people is important. Being nice to people is very important.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before. You said you're always nice to everyone.
If somebody wants to hire you or wants to hire another saxophone player of equal ability, who are they going to call? They're going to call the nicest guy, the guy that gets along with everybody.
That's certainly true.
So I tell that to kids when I lecture at the colleges.
Yeah. Well, fast forward a few years. New York. You moved to New York City, and you said 1970.
January 1970.
I've been focused just in the last couple of weeks reading the new Michael Brecker biography, which we spoke about recently. And the loft scene that was happening during that time in New York City, I found to be absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
And tell me about that.
Well, anybody that had a loft and it would have, set up drums and amplifiers and stuff like that, and you would, and they'd have jam sessions. Yeah. And it was, anybody that wanted to play would show up. And I got my own loft in 1975, and I had it for 20 years down on Houston Street.
Cool.
And we had jam sessions at my house too. But when I was living on West 92nd Street, Dave Sanborn used to come by twice a week, and we would jam. There was a drummer next door that had drums and stuff, amps set up at his apartment, and we would jam up there. Randy Brecker would come up also. Mike Brecker would come up, and but there was a whole thing. It was just, people would just call up and say, "Hey, we're gonna jam at Sue Evans' loft," you know, and you just show up and call tunes, and you know, we were refining our craft. You know, the more you play, the better you know, you want that subconscious part of your brain to kick in. You want to, you know, give it a chance.
At that point in your life, how much were you playing? Like how out of every day, how much of that was spent towards music?
Well, I was either practicing or playing. I spent quite a few years playing Saturday Night Live on the weekends and doing recording sessions during the week. I would do anywhere from 5 to 12 recording sessions during the week before Saturday Night Live would come in, and I was the arranger for Saturday Night Live, so it kept me pretty busy.
I would say so.
But I was also starting a family, you know, having kids, and so that was nice to be off the road and at home, and you know, with the kids. The kids to see me every day.
How many children do you have?
I have 2 daughters, 43 and 46.
Okay.
And a 10-and-a-half-year-old granddaughter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Indeed. How's having children changed your life? What?
They give you a purpose. You know, there's a reason that you make money and have a house, and you know, you want to send them to college, and you want to you know, do all the right things for them. Can I tell you a story about the Blues Brothers?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The Blues Brothers almost never got started. Danny and John got this idea about the Blues Brothers, and I was called in for the first meeting. I was the arranger for the show. This is March 1978. John and Danny started talking about these guys that wore sunglasses day and night, and they were both orphans, and they had sort of like very little emotional response to anything. You know, developing the characters. So I wrote an arrangement of a song called Rocket 88 by James Cotton.
Okay.
And we rehearsed the Saturday Night Live band backing up the Blues Brothers. We did it for Lorne Michaels, the producer. Didn't make the show.
What does he know?
So John and Danny are still hot on the idea the next week. So I wrote an arrangement of a song called Hey Bartender. And we rehearsed the band. We did it for Lorne Michaels. Week number 2.
Yeah.
Lorne said, frankly, I don't see anything funny about the Blues Brothers. So, okay, the third week, you know, John, Danny, they said, look, if Lorne doesn't like it, if we're not getting on, we're wasting our time. We got to move on. I'm like, okay. So Lorne comes out of read through Wednesday about 3:15, and we have to do a live show on Saturday. And Lorne says, the show is 3 minutes short. What the hell are we going to do? And John and Danny jumped on it. Said, Lorne, the Blues Brothers. So Lorne says, well, we have nothing worthwhile to put in those 3 minutes. You guys might as well make fools of yourselves.
Yeah.
He put us on. So now this is way before internet and cell phones, stuff like that. The switchboard lit up with phone calls Monday morning, and letters and cards started pouring in. And the viewing audience obviously liked the Blues Brothers. So we ended up doing a couple more Blues Brothers songs with the Saturday Night Live band, and then John and Danny decided they wanted to make a separate band. They wanted to have their own band called the Blues Brothers Band. And they took 4 of us from Saturday Night Live, Lou Marini, myself, Steve Jordan, and Paul Schaefer. And I was going to be the horn arranger, and they said, if you need another horn, it's your decision. So I hired Alan Rubin to be the trumpet player. And I also recommended Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn. I had played in a band with them called Levon Helm and the RCO All-Stars. So I knew they'd be perfect for the band, and so on my recommendation, John and Danny hired them. We had a meeting at John's house one time, and he said, well, now we have a Matt Guitar Murphy in the band, and we have a Donald Duck Dunn in the band, so everybody has to have a middle name. And if you can't make up a middle name for yourself, we'll make one up for you. And I immediately said, how about Tom Bones Malone? Nickname I got in high school. They said, that's it. And Lou Marini is standing next to me. He says, how about Blue Lou Marini? So bang, that was his nickname. And
that's funny.
And John made up Alan Mr. Fabulous Rubin for him, and they made up Steve the Colonel Cropper for him. And so everybody got a middle name.
Oh, that's funny. That was a later question in the interview. Yeah, I did not. So you actually got the nickname in high school at some point then?
Yes, and it didn't really stick, but it stuck in my mind. You know, and everybody usually says, well, how'd you get the name Bones? You know, it must be from trombone. Well, it was actually because I was tall and thin. I was 6'2½" and weighed about 145.
Oh,
so I was skin and bones.
I just assumed it came from the trombone.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
And that's fine if people want to think that too.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Oh, that's too funny. So in regards to Saturday Night Live. How did you get the gig? How did that come about?
Well, when I moved to New York in January 1970, I had played, summer of 1969, I had played on the road with Woody Herman's band. And the lead trombone player was a guy named Bob Burgess, legendary guy. Played lead with every big band of, Buddy Rich, Stan Kenton, every big band there was. And I called him up. I said, I want to move to New York. Can I crash on your floor? And he said, yeah, come on up. So I came on up, and a couple of months later, Bob went back on the road with Woody Herman, and I inherited this cheap apartment. And so this friend of mine named Hannibal Marvin Peterson called me up one day and said, I want to move to New York. Can I crash on your floor? And I said, sure. So he came up, and he immediately started playing with Rahsaan Roland Kirk, the guy that played 3 saxophones at one time.
Sure did. Yeah.
And he also started playing with Gil Evans. Okay, so one night he had 2 gigs. And so he says, look, I got 2 gigs tonight. The one with Gil Evans doesn't pay anything. Do you want to cover for me with Gil Evans? And I said, sure. So I went down there, and I met all these people that changed the rest of my life. Gil Evans, who I played with for the last 15 years of his life. He was became my musical father and arranging teacher. And then that same night, I met David Sanborn, Billy Harper, Lou Soloff, Dave Bargeron, Howard Johnson. Okay, so a few years later, Howard Johnson was asked to put together a horn section for Saturday Night Live. And he chose me. He liked me because I played tuba and saxophone and trumpet and a bunch. He was a multi-instrumentalist too, but he liked the fact that I played tuba. And he became my jazz tuba mentor.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, he recommended me to be in the original horn section at Saturday Night Live.
That's a great story. That's a great story. And from there, who all, even being on Saturday Night Live, you got to play with a list of other musicians as well, right?
Oh yeah, I was the arranger for the show too. I arranged 3 songs for a group called The Band from Woodstock, and in the spring of '76, and we hit it off, and they took me on the road with them in the summer of '76. Yeah, because we had 4 months off from Saturday Night Live every summer.
They're hit The Weight, right?
The Weight, exactly. Yep. Oh yeah, yeah. And I was in a movie called The Last Waltz. It was on Thanksgiving, 1976.
Okay, yeah.
And we backed up all kinds of different people, and I did some arranging for the band also. After that, Levon Helm formed a band called Levon Helm and the RCO All-Stars, which in a way was a predecessor to the Blues Brothers because it was Steve Cropper, Duck Dunn, Lou Marini, Alan Rubin, and myself.
Oh, wow.
We're all in the band.
That's a great band.
Yeah, plus Paul Butterfield.
Yeah.
Dr. John.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Booker T. Jones.
Yeah.
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 The killer band. And Howard Johnson. And Howard Johnson. So I was the arranger for that band too. So
that's fantastic.
I've just met so many cool people on Saturday Night Live. Also, the recording scene in New York was changing over from big band style to rock and roll. For records, commercials, and people to see on TV. Oh, here's a long-haired rock and roll trombone player. We'll hire him for our session. So it didn't hurt my recording career either.
How exactly did you hook up with Blood, Sweat, and Tears? How did that come into fruition?
Well, remember I at that Gil Evans job where I was subbing, I met Lou Soloff and Dave Bargeron.
Okay. So it spawned out of that.
So when Chuck Winfield left the band, I was actually living in L.A. At the time. I'd moved out there to play with Frank Zappa.
Oh, okay.
And it was January 1973. Chuck Winfield, Dave Bargeron calls me up. Chuck Winfield's leaving the band. Do you want to join the band as a trumpet player? So bang.
Oh,
Yeah, I got on the plane, checked all my stuff, gave my car away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that many times in my life.
Just up and move.
Just gone. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. Crashed on Lou Marini's floor until I could get an apartment.
Yeah, that's awesome. All the stories. My goodness. Speaking of Frank Zappa, how did Frank Zappa come about?
Okay, I moved to New York 1970, doing little jobs here and there. And 1971, Lou Marini moves to New York, and he's playing with Doc Severinsen's weekend band. Doc is the leader of the Tonight Show band in New York with big band, and every Saturday and Sunday he has a job. and they'd be gig paid $250 each night, which was a lot of money in 1971.
Yeah.
So anyway, and Snooky Young was in the band, Ross Tompkins, Ed Shaughnessy, Lou Tabakin. It was a good band. And so during that year, the Tonight Show moves, Johnny Carson moves to LA. The weekend band keeps playing. You just go to the airport. But one night we found ourselves, the guest music on the Tonight Show in Los Angeles. Doc's weekend band. We did Only the Beginnings by Chicago.
Oh, okay.
So I got to play a trombone solo on national TV. And so go back to the hotel there in Burbank near the studio, and Lou Marini and I are roommates. And our old friend from North Texas, Sal Marquez, a jazz trumpet player, best known for being Branford Marsalis's trumpet player on the later version of the Tonight Show. Anyway, so he comes over to the room and we're hanging out, and so Sal, what are you doing? What's going on for you in LA? And he says, I'm playing with Frank Zappa's Grand Wazoo. And I said, what's that? He says, it's a 20-piece all-instrumental band. And he says, our tuba player, Howard Johnson, is moving back to New York. We're looking for a tuba player. Do you know anybody that plays tuba? And about that time, he tripped over the tuba that was on the floor in my hotel room.
Yeah.
I was playing tuba, bass trombone, and trombone with Doc's band. And he looks down and he says, you play tuba, don't you, Tom? And I said, yeah. He says, you want to play with Frank? And I said, sure. So he calls up Frank from the hotel room. You know, this is 1972. He says, Frank, I know this guy, blah, 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 blah. How does he sound? Well, Frank, I've never heard him play the tuba. Tom, how do you sound on the tuba? He says. So I picked up the tuba and played it over the telephone.
Oh, that's too
funny. He hired me. We go over to his house the next day, and Frank says, Sal tells me you play some other instruments besides the tuba. And I said, yes. He says, well, give me a list. So I put down bass trombone, trombone, trumpet, flugelhorn, piccolo trumpet, flute, tenor sax, piccolo. And I showed up 2 weeks later for rehearsal, and Frank had rewritten all his music, so I had a part on every instrument. Now I'm playing a piccolo trumpet solo. I'm sight reading a piccolo trumpet solo. I'm sitting next to Malcolm McNabb, the famous trumpet player. I had no idea who he was. Malcolm McNabb recorded the Tchaikovsky violin concerto on the trumpet with orchestra.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Said he practiced it for 30 years. If you've ever been to the movies and heard a trumpet solo, it was probably Malcolm McNabb.
Okay.
Yeah. He played on 1,000 movie soundtracks.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
You're now playing with Frank Zappa. Did you know who Frank Zappa was at the time? I mean.
Oh yeah, I did know. I did know who he was. Sure.
At 2022 we're in. Obviously, everybody knows who Frank Zappa is, but you don't always know.
Well, he wasn't known as a guy who had horn players playing with him. So the Grand Wazoo was a whole different thing for him.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he ever had a horn section before this band.
Okay.
And suddenly it's like a whole bunch of different horns. And so we did the tour with the 20-piece Grand Wazoo, and then he cut the band down to a 12-piece band. And I was still playing a whole bunch of different instruments in the 12-piece band. He called it the Mothers of Invention. We rehearsed, we did a tour. And then he cut the band down to 10 pieces, and we rehearsed and did another tour. And then Frank says, the next tour is only going to have one horn, and it's going to be Bruce Fowler. I said, cool. He says, Bruce tells me you play electric bass. I said, yes. He said, you want to audition? I said, sure. So I went over to Frank's house and auditioned, and I remember George Duke was there. And so anyway, I thought I sounded pretty good. And so I didn't hear anything from Frank. I heard from the grapevine that he was auditioning other people who had played with him before, people who played and sang. And so a couple of weeks go by, and nothing. I call Frank, leave a message on his phone. Frank, it's Tom. What's happening? Let me know. Nothing. Another week goes by. Dave Bargeron calls me up. You know, we need a trumpet player with blood, sweat, and tears. Can you be in New York tomorrow? Bang. And then, anyway, the day after I left, Frank called to say that I had the job playing with the tour with Jean-Luc Ponty and George Duke. 3 tours of Europe and a tour of Japan for double the money that Blood, Sweat, and Tears was going to pay me. Yeah. Anyway, I never looked back. I recommended Bruce Fowler's brother, Tom Fowler, who was a fine bass player. And Frank loved him. He sounded great with Frank for the next 3 or 4 years.
I think things worked out pretty well for you. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No regrets.
In the Michael Brecker book, they talk quite a bit about the jingle scene, that everybody was, it was very lucrative, getting calls left and right to go and record commercial jingles on any given time during the day. How prolific was that? And were you a part of that? Were you recording?
Yes. Well, as a studio musician in New York, there were more, we call them jingles. There were more commercials being recorded than there were records. So, I would do anywhere from 5 to 12 sessions during a week, and most of them were jingles. There was a commercial scene. You could walk in and sight read music and play in tune and play with the rhythm section. Bang! Sure. You could make a living doing that. So I played on about 3,500 commercials during my career.
That's quite a few. Are there any ones that stand out that we would remember?
Oh, well, let's see. Amtrak. One funny story. Like years later, I had arranged and contracted the horns for a record called "Holding Out for a Hero" by Bonnie Tyler, and it was John Faddis, Randy Brecker, Mike Brecker, and myself. And so, I mean, this is about 2 years ago. Doritos decided they wanted to use the music, and instead of re-recording the music, they wanted to use the original masters. So checks started coming in the mail, and they finally stopped after $14,000 came in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
So you never know how it's going to work.
Oh, interesting. Business. Not to mention, I don't know why you'd want to re-record that.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, oh, geez. I remember I recorded an Amtrak commercial that ran for 7 years.
Okay.
So you get another repayment every 13 weeks.
So there's residual income that would keep coming in.
Yeah, if your commercial keeps running, you get some extra money.
Oh, very, very neat.
But yeah, Mike and Randy Brecker and I were the horn section on a lot of recordings.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty good horn section.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was really fun playing with those guys.
Yeah,
I had a band for when I was the music director at Saturday Night Live from '81 to '85. Mm-hmm. The last 2 years I was there, '83 to '85, I had a 6-piece band with Michael Brecker, and he was just an amazing musician to play with in that band. Bass, piano, drums, Michael Brecker and myself, and we played some good music during that period.
I can only imagine. At what point did you become the musical director, and how did that happen? As far as the band shifting and changing.
After the Blues Brothers movie, the producer and engineer on the Blues Brothers recordings, all three of them, mm-hmm. Briefcase Full of Blues, the movie soundtrack, and Made in America, was a guy named Bob Tischler, engineer, producer, and we became good friends. And we worked together very closely on the soundtrack for the movie. It was recorded in Chicago in the summer in July 1979. And Bob Tischler became line producer for Saturday Night Live in the fall of '81, and he hired me to be the music director.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty cool. Yeah. I watched an interview with Michael Brecker where he talked about Saturday Night Live being fairly nonchalant and how he was a laid-back person and he was funny. Yes. So I think he was joking a little bit. But he talked about the fact that Saturday Night Live for him was a fairly low commitment because he would show up and play on Saturday night, more or less. And
yes.
Was that your experience? I mean, you seem like you had a little bit different gig being a musical director and whatnot. How labor intensive was it?
Music director job was had a lot more pressure on it. But I made it easy for Mike to show up, and we would play songs that we both knew. We would play Picking Up the Pieces. We would play Brecker Brothers songs.
Sure. Yeah.
I'd play trumpet, and he'd play tenor, and so I made it easy for him. I just wanted him to feel relaxed and just play, sound his best. I didn't want to make anything, complicated.
What did you learn from him, out of curiosity, playing with him for a few years?
Oh, well, just listening to him play and his harmonic concept. Every time he picked up the horn and played, it blew my mind. And I would lean over to him and say, "That was a great solo," and he would say, "No, that sucked." He was very self-critical, but I think that's the reason he became as good as he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, I guess so.
Yeah. He was supposed to play a solo on my my Soul Bones record, and he said, well, I'm sick right now, but when I get well, I'll show up 2 weeks later.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's 2007, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned your album, The Soul Bones. How many albums have you recorded as a leader? And
just I recorded one that I never released. I listened to it and I decided I didn't like the way I sounded, so I trashed. I threw a whole album.
Really?
Yeah, threw it a whole album in the trash with Lenny White on drums too.
Wow.
Yeah, but one called Eastern Standards Time, jazz album.
Yes.
And Soul Bones was recorded in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. It's more R&B oriented.
That's funny that you threw an entire album away. Was that financially? That probably isn't the greatest decision to just.
Well,
it's got to be tough to just walk away.
I wish I had played better on it, but we went direct to 2-track. We didn't. It wasn't done on multi-track so that I could overdub something on top of it. I didn't want to release anything that didn't sound as good as I wanted it to.
Yeah, that's definitely understandable.
I wish I had played better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a project right now where I'm thinking about that. So there you go. Do you have plans to release anything else as a band leader?
Oh, well, I'm moving to LA in a couple months, and I was thinking about maybe playing some of my jazz charts, putting a band together out in LA and playing some at a jazz club, just for fun.
So you were in the Blues Brothers, obviously, movie in 1980, and then Blues Brothers 2000, the movie that came out, I think, 1998.
Yes.
What's it like being in a movie?
Well, most of the time you're just waiting around on the trailer, waiting for them to call you in. There's more waiting around than anything else. You show up at 7 a.m. and you go to makeup and you go to hair, and then you sit in the trailer. And some days you sit in the trailer till they wrap at 6 o'clock. But then other days you're under the lights and you're in the studio shooting over and over and over. Bob's Country Bunker, we were in there for a week.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and
with the chicken wire.
Yeah, I actually gave that to Danny. One night after Saturday Night Live, after the Blues Brothers had started, but we were still at Saturday Night Live. This is, I guess, around 78 or 79. Danny started interviewing people to get ideas for the movie. And so this is like 1 a.m. The show's over. Bones, can you come up to my office? So I told him stories about playing in sleazy clubs in Mississippi where they had chicken wire over the bandstand. And he put that in the movie.
Did they really throw beer bottles then, too?
They had these, they looked like brown long-necked beer bottles, and they were made of sugar so that they smashed and were not dangerous. Like during the breaks, we'd hit them over our head, or hit somebody else over the head with them. Just, yeah.
They
had cases and cases of those,
What was your experience with John Landis? You directed those, right?
Yeah. He was absolutely great. We're still friends. We still communicate.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I thought he was very creative and very, and he would always, he would always tell the musicians when we had a speaking line, he said, don't act, just talk, don't act.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
Watching the movie, the band does a nice job. You did a nice job. It comes across as genuine, like you all were friends hanging out on a movie set, more or less. I think that's one of the reasons why people like the Blues Brothers.
Arranging music for television has been a big part of my career. I've done 2,700 arrangements for television. And one day, I'm on the Late Show with David Letterman. We used to shoot from about 4:30 to about 5:30. So we wrapped about 5:35, go up to the dressing room, changing clothes. It's about 5:45. Can you meet with Paul in his dressing room? Paul says, Renee Fleming is going to be on the show tomorrow. Okay. She's going to do the top 10. We need 13 opera excerpts by 11 in the morning. Here's a CD with the 11 opera excerpts. And here's Renee Fleming's brand new album. So figure out what keys she should sing them in. So there was no rehearsal with her before the arrangements had to be the deadline. And so Paul says, how are we going to pull this off? I said, I'll play flute. Aaron, our saxophone player, will play oboe. We'll hire a clarinet player. We'll hire a French horn player. And you'll play the string parts on the synthesizer. And so that's what we did. And So I stayed up all night and I got everything done. And all night I was staying up. I was thinking Renee Fleming is going to be, she's going to be difficult to work with. She's going to be a real diva. Turned out to be absolutely delightful. Exactly the opposite. Great sense of humor, very professional, and easy to work with. And I had one of the songs in the wrong key. I had the songs on my laptop. I changed the key, printed them out in Paul's office next door to the rehearsal space, and bang. And you can see that if you go to YouTube and say David Letterman top 10 Renee Fleming.
I will have to watch it.
Yeah. We pulled it off.
Well, it's funny.
I stayed up all night, but
behind every one of those segments, there's some little story of, you know, someone like yourself putting together the music for that, or even the script for it, or anything that happens in the production. That's always been amazing.
Oh yeah. Same thing happened on Saturday Night Live. Olivia Newton-John has a big hit on Physical, so she's going to be on the show. Well, what time is the band loading in? She doesn't have a band. It was a studio album. You have to put it together. So I had to put together a band and 3 songs in this multi-synthesizer recordings. Yeah, and there was nothing was ever written out. So I had to transcribe everything, write everything, and hire a band and put it together.
Was there ever a time where you didn't get it done?
I always got it done. Yeah. Oh yeah. You don't have any choice.
You don't have a choice.
Your back's up against the wall. Same thing happened with Robert Plant and the Honey Drippers. You know, the lead singer with Led Zeppelin. You know, he had this record out. What time's the band loading in? He doesn't have a band. It's a studio album. You have to put the band together. Yeah. So I put together a band with John Faddis and Michael Brecker and all these guys, and it worked out.
Well, that band could probably play in their sleep.
Yeah, lots of incidents like that in my arranging career.
Oh yeah. As far as your arranging, obviously it's different arranging commercially for something like Letterman show or Saturday Night Live versus arranging, an original piece of music or something that you want to do. But how do you approach arranging? Like, what's your vision when you sit down to arrange a piece of music?
Well, most of the time, like particularly on Letterman, Paul wants to cover a song, a pop song, and so it's basically transcribing. It's writing down the exact notes of the bass and the guitar and the keyboard voicings and the drum exactly. Transcribing, writing down exactly what was played on the record. So that's what most of that arranging work is, really. Real arranging is when you come up with something original. Like somebody makes a record, and I create some horn parts and put it on their record.
Yeah. Yes, and you've obviously done quite a bit of that. I met you on the internet. How has that changed your career and the type of things you're doing now at this point, as far as email and Facebook?
I'm doing a lot of work at home. I have a studio set up with Pro Tools 11. I have a U87 microphone, and people send me their records, and I make up horn parts, and I record the whole horn section myself, one track at a time. Typically, trumpet, tenor sax, trombone, baritone sax, for rock-oriented records. But I've done, entire big bands at my house by myself. Yeah, so that's a lot of work just right at my house, especially during the pandemic. I almost have enough for a big band record, a one-man big band record to release.
Well, you could record the whole thing yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We haven't covered David Letterman and the CBS Orchestra. Tell me how that came about.
When I was music director at Saturday Night Live from '81 to '85. One day, 1982, early 1982, if I remember correctly, Liz Anderson calls me up. She's my unit manager that works downstairs in the office. I was a contractor for the show, and so I would send her some information, and she would fill out the union contracts for me and send them into the union. Okay. So she calls me up one day. She says, "I got a new job. I'm the associate producer of the David Letterman show." I said, "What's that?" She says, "You've never seen it. It comes on early in the morning, but we're changing the show to late night. And we're looking for a band leader to lead a 4-piece band and to be a personality on the show. I wonder if you would be interested." Well, the financial offer was about 20% of what I was making at Saturday Night Live. So I said, I politely turned it down, but I said, "You should call this kid Paul Schaefer. He'll take care of it." Paul had gone out to LA to be in a sitcom with Greg Avigan called A Year at the Top. And They went about 6 or 7 episodes, and the network pulled the plug on them. So he'd come back to New York about 2 weeks before this phone call. Said, call Paul Shaffer, here's his number. I didn't hear another word for about a month, and then I had a network feed monitor in my office, a corner office, 17th floor, 30 Rock. And I was working on a music arrangement. I heard a band playing. I looked over at the monitor, and it was Paul Shaffer, Steve Jordan, Hiram Bullock, and Will Lee.
Yeah, another great band.
Paul got the job, and nobody even told me. But anyway, they were downstairs, so I would go down and hang with them if I had a moment free.
Sure.
And the Letterman show at NBC was 50% owned by Johnny Carson Productions.
Okay.
And Dave always thought that when Johnny Carson retired that he would get the job. Well, Johnny Carson retired, and some NBC executives decided that they wanted to keep Dave where he was, and instead of moving him into Johnny Carson's slot, we'll just keep him where he is and we'll get somebody else to be Johnny Carson. Well, Dave did not like this. And Dave's contract ran out about the same time. So he started a bidding war between ABC and CBS won. And so Paul started the band. Paul moved his band over to, and he got pressure from the network, because the other shows in that slot had bigger bands than just 4 pieces. So he had an extra guitar and he had an extra keyboard. Bernie Worrell was the keyboard player. Bernie, after about a month on the show, Bernie had put out his own album, and he left the show to go out on the road and promote his album. So instead of hiring another keyboard player, he hired me on trumpet and a guy named Bruce Kapler on tenor sax. And we were the horn section for the first 3 or 4 years. Then he hired a full-time trumpet player named Al Ches in the 3rd or 4th year. And so I moved over to playing more trombone, baritone sax, tenor sax, whatever else they needed. I had like 11 instruments set up on the stage.
I do remember
every
that.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is David Letterman as sweet a man as he seems to be?
Dave was very nice, and he was especially very nice to the band. But he was very nice to everybody: cameraman, lighting, sound people. Just total class act, I have to say.
Yeah, he certainly seems like a great guy. So.
He paid for my house, both my cars, put both my daughters through college, and still have a little stash besides that. Yeah.
Very nice. Do you still speak to him at all?
Not really. Not really. No.
Wait, actually, what about Dan Aykroyd? Do you talk to Dan Aykroyd?
We do communicate. Yeah. Especially after I moved out to LA, I'll be able to see him a little more frequently.
We're here in Cleveland. Do you have any stories about being in Cleveland in the past, touring through, or?
Oh well, I was here on the road with Woody Herman. Was here with Lee Castle and the Jimmy Dorsey Band, summer of '67. Woody Herman, '69. Frank Zappa, 1972. Blood, Sweat, and Tears, 1973. And Paul's band was the house band for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Awards for about 25 years. And so I was the arranger for those too. And we played quite a few of those. Most memorable was probably Ringo getting inducted here in Cleveland. And Paul came out to induct him. And also I got to play at another time in Cleveland, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I got to play with Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was kind of over the top. But and most of the time the awards were at the Waldorf in the Grand Ballroom. But it only seated 1,000 people as opposed to this place in Cleveland. Sports stadium seats about 9,000.
Yeah, right.
So it was really it was nice to let people see the show for a reasonable price as opposed to just record executives.
Any fond memories here?
Oh, so many fond memories. Yeah, nice people, good food, good times. Oh yeah.
How do you want history to remember you and your music?
Oh, fondly. If there's any students watching this, just be nice to everybody, regardless of if somebody speaks a different language, be nice to them. Somebody's skin is a different color, be nice to them. Somebody's a different religion, be nice to them. Somebody's from a different country, be nice to them. Be nice to everybody. It will open up a whole new world of good things that will happen to you.
Yeah.
Because you're nice to everybody.
Yeah. Well, words to live by. Tom Malone, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing the evening with me.
My pleasure.